This episode contains subject matter that some people may find distressing. For more details, view the show notes.
So I was in Iraq. We were sitting on the 14 July bridge. Up next to my window on the right side of the car appeared a young lad who then proceeded to open his shirt and was wearing a suicide vest. I heard him say to the Americans, "I don't want to die."
My friend had a baby, now he don't sleep no more. Waves crash in his eyes, tides on the nursery floor. Oh, my friend had a baby.
We just finished swimming lessons and we're heading back up to the car, and my daughter, our 5-year-old, got bitten by an ant and she was beside herself crying. So absolutely manic, tired from swimming, really upset that she'd be bitten by an ant. We got her into the car. She was still crying a lot. I was like, okay, what can I do to sort of calm the situation over? I said, sweetie, I'm going to let you, to help me make you feel better about this, I want you to think about the worst word you know, and I'm going to let you say it out loud. And you're going to tell that ant off. You know, expecting something pretty mild. And she gets this wry smile over her face and she goes, "Fucking hell, Ant."
Priceless. I actually had a similar experience this morning. My girls were out. They'd been ready for school and they were outside on their monkey bars swinging upside down and stuff. And we got a rule that if I flip the bird to the girls, they're allowed to flip it back. They're not allowed to just use it, but they can flip it back at me. So I waited for my 6-year-old to be upside down with her hands on the bar. And then I flipped the bird at her through the window, thinking that she couldn't do it. So what she did then was found her balance point and then went, "Hey, Dad," and then flipped it straight back at me. Yeah, she found a way.
It's so hard in those moments because you feel so proud of them for doing something like that. And then, but you sort of, your parenting kicks and you go, I was wetting myself with laughter in the front seat when she dropped that.
Yeah.
And my wife sort of looking at me going, see, they do listen.
I remember a story my mother-in-law told me, and it was the first time my eldest daughter, she's now 11, and she swore, and she was in the back of their car, and they went over a level crossing on Womma Road. I don't know whether you're aware of it, but it's a level crossing, and they went over it, and it bounced the car a little bit. And from the back seat, they hear, "For fuck's sake!" That was the first time she'd sworn.
This is honestly one of the ongoing things I know in myself. I don't know if I'm ever going to grow out of it. There's nothing funnier to me than a kid swearing.
Yeah,
and I'm a bit worried I'm going to end up with this absolute foul-mouthed little shit who's just mouthing off constantly and all the time. So it's reassuring, much more reassuring than you think, knowing that you two still cackle away when the kids are.
Oh, look, I still fart. I still laugh when they fart. You know, I'm trying to say to my girls, young ladies, don't fart in public. Like it's not something young ladies do, and try to teach them that. But inside, I'm dying. Just pride, absolute pride that my girls have picked something up from me, and they're going to carry that forward.
Now you got 2 or 3 girls, Damien?
2 girls. All up, I've got 5 kids. So thanks, Army, I've been married twice. I like my current wife, so I'll keep her for a while. But I've got 3 to my ex. And my eldest is 30 and now serving in the Defence Force himself.
You're probably hearing another voice in the room that sounds a lot more put together than Alex and myself. We've got Damien with us here today, who has a herd. Is it when you've got more than 4 kids? Do you have a herd of children or a flock of children? A murder of children?
I think it's a murder.
He's got a group of them anyway. From what you were saying earlier, 2 daughters, 3 sons.
No, I've got all up 3 daughters, 2 sons.
3 daughters, 2 sons, rightio. So Damien has a really awesome background and really great perspective in terms of being a veteran. And how many years did you serve in the Army, Damien?
All up about 26, I think.
26, yeah, right.
Yeah.
That's that's unbelievable amount of time. I guess from your perspective, I'm really curious to hear about how your time in the army influenced your role as a dad, and from my understanding, you've got a son at the moment who is serving and sort of following your footsteps as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'd love to think he was following my footsteps, but unfortunately he joined the RAF, not the army. But yeah, he's enlisted into the Defence Force himself in his own right, having a very successful career.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
And how when your son approached you about joining the Air Force, how, I guess for you as a ex-service member, how did that feel to you? Were you worried? Were you proud? What did it all look like, feel like, sound like?
There's a huge element of pride that comes with that. You think that, okay, I've got somebody now starting to carry on what has become the family legacy. So my granddad served in World War II. My dad served, my uncles have served, my sister served, I served, and now my son serves. So every generation of my family, since my granddad immigrated, has served, and that's huge. So I like to think that we've done something right in terms of where we've gone and what we've sort of put on them as far as what's important.
And what can you tell us about your role in the army? I know you've had a very long and successful career in that respect, and then you've transitioned that into civilian life to also continue to build on that career and all those capabilities you've got. Can you walk us through the 26 years?
Yeah, if I can. So 94 I enlisted, and then I was only young, like 18, mostly to piss my dad off because Dad was in the Navy, and I knew what he thought of Army, and I thought, you know what, that's what I'm doing. I wanted to join the Defence Force, and I didn't want to walk in his shadow, and that was probably the biggest thing, is I didn't want to be known as his son. I wanted to have my own career. So, yeah, I joined the Army, which pissed him off, so go on. Achieved. And that was achieved before I even left basic training. And I'm sure that's been the same with my own son. I'm sure he went, all right, yep, this is going to piss Dad off. I'm going to join the Air Force, the softest of all services, and we'll get there. So I enlisted in 94 as a young 18-year-old, not lost in my way. I was doing security full time, but not happy with what I was doing either. Met my then wife, or the person that went on to become my wife, and had my first child. Then was pushed over to Southeast Asia, where I was in Malaysia, and missed first birthdays and stuff like that. Birthday, Christmas, I missed both those for my eldest. Come back, then deployed on my first real deployment into East Timor in 99, where I got injured and was pretty much had my hand forced to change trades. They said to me, find a new job or get out. I wasn't ready to get out, so I changed trades and found a trade that they call close protection or personal security, and did that for the next 20-odd years, where I deployed into the Middle East about 8 times in various roles doing that. Over that time, I had my next son, my daughter. I had a marriage breakdown, found my current wife, the one that I said I like, so I'll keep her. I've been with her for 17 years now, I reckon, close to 17 years. Been married for 15. And had two more little girls with her. Separated from defence in Adelaide, where I now call Adelaide home. So going from being a New South Welshman dead fast and never living anywhere else, or never wanting to live anywhere else, to now not wanting to go back. I'm very happy in South Australia, or Radelaide as we call it in the locals. You're welcome to visit, but don't stay. We don't want it to get any bigger than it is.
Am I allowed to ask about your time in personal protection? Are you allowed to talk about the people that you protected, or is that classified?
I can talk about the people I worked with. So my main role in the protection space was ambassadors to the Middle East. So while I was in Iraq, I was the Australian ambassador to Iraq's on his team. I wasn't the only one. We had a number on our team. When I was in Afghanistan, I was the 2IC, the Australian detention facility over there. So myself and the boss were sent in to clean up what become quite a large national shit fight, which made media. So it's all open source information, where some soldiers were charged with falsifying documents and stuff like that. So we were sent in to clean that up and get all that back on track. which we did, and that was a 9-month trip. My last protection job was with the commander of the Australian Forces in the Middle East, and that was an individual job where we lived out of sunny Dubai, and I just travelled all around the Middle East with him for his meetings, allowing him to do his job, some of it armed, some of it unarmed. So I looked after the Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister at one stage. Yeah. So some other politicians in and out of the Middle East when they wanted to go on junkets.
Tell us a bit about your first deployment after having your first child. Where was it, and what was that feeling of stepping away from family?
So my first trip away, non-domestic, so my first trip overseas, I won't call it a deployment because it was into Malaysia for Butterworth, and any of the military that listen to this will call me bullshit. Will call me on my bullshit if I say that's a deployment. But I was only, 19, 20 when that happened. So I was 19 when my first son was born. So I was only 19 or 20 when that happened. And you sort of, I compartmentalised my trips. So I really convinced myself that I was doing it for the greater good of my family. My job was very much to protect and provide, and that was my belief then. And if that meant that I missed out on some of that nice stuff like first birthdays and Christmases, then that was okay in my mind back then. And that's how I managed it. No, I really managed to block out the personal side of that feeling of missing out just by compartmentalising it and saying to myself and convincing myself that it was my job as a dad to protect and provide, and this was how I did that.
Do you remember how long you were away on that first trip?
4 months.
What's the, Alex, I'll steer the question to you. What's the longest amount of time that you've spent away from your kids in one sitting?
Maybe a week when I went skiing last year. Just for the record, my wife did say, you need to go on this trip and I want you to have fun. So I'm not just saying I disappeared to the snow for a week.
They just, you just said you were going for a pack of smokes or something and you're loading the skis up in the car.
You've got 3 kids, I get it.
In those, I guess, in any deployment then, or just, I guess that stands for anyone who's away from their family, in those 4 months, how much of that was no communication?
Not a lot. We lived on a base in Butterworth, so we had access to phones. It's Australian deemed to be Australian territory, so we had access to Australian phone lines, nights and stuff. So we could call home. We obviously didn't have the internet and video chats and stuff that we have these days, but we could call home every night. Mobile phones were only a new thing, so we didn't have those, but we had access to desk phones and stuff that we could use all the time.
Say you're overseas, you're a dad, and then say you phone home and you hear so-and-so's sick or so-and-so's hurt themselves. Like, what's that mental challenge like to go, I'm trying to serve my country, but I've also feel like I've got this responsibility at home?
I'll put this on record, and I say it not to my wife, but I say it to anyone else that will listen. My wife is my hero. So, and I legitimately mean that. The bullshit that she has to put up with, or the wives or husbands, because females deploy as well, the bullshit that the partners have to put up with when you're away, you don't get. You go over to Afghanistan, or you go over to Iraq, or even over to Malaysia, where my brother-in-law is right now, doing the same trip that I did back in 1996. I did that one, and he's on the same trip right now, same time period, everything. You focus on you focus on your job, and you focus what gets you home in the end. You don't focus on what's going on at home. So when you do make that phone call home, and it was the last couple of trips that really hit me hardest, when I could hear the kids crying, or I could hear the kids yelling and screaming and fighting. And I'm like, shit, I should be there. I should be there helping her. And then you hang up the phone and you sort of walk away from the computer, or you walk away from the phone after a video chat or a phone call, and you go, am I doing the right thing? Can I continue to do this? Have I reached that time in my life where I really need to step away and look at what else is around, and then your mind starts to travel to transition, and then that becomes scary because all you've known your whole life is defence, that sheltered workshop that is defence. When you ask how do you feel, it really depends on what stage in your life you're at, I think. While I was in Malaysia in 20, I could hear the kids screaming, and I'd ask, like my son screaming because he was hungry, and I'm like, what's going on? She was like, oh, he's just hungry. And I'm like, oh, okay. And you just brush it aside. You don't know any better. But as you get older and you start to see how your kids live and learn how your kids live and become more and more part of their life, you start to think, shit, that's where I belong. I don't belong doing this anymore. And that's the hardest decision of your life.
Did you find when you were away from your family that other parents would tend to kind of flock together and talk about their kids and what they're missing out back at home? Or was it easier to not talk about it a lot because it's a reminder that as a part of your job, as part of your service and the sacrifices you're making, was it easier to just focus on the job at hand and deal with the family stuff later?
Back in the early days, like East Timor, I was a combat engineer, which is a predominantly male environment. And back in 99, males didn't have feelings. If you got hurt, you just cracked on. And that was very much that stigma that went with being a male in defence back in the 90s. As I went through the ranks and eventually become a warrant officer and I took a team over to Afghanistan as the 2IC, I was very conscious of how often my men were contacting home, especially those with families. One of my soldiers was due to have a baby and we had a couple of jobs come up that required them to go what we call outside the wire, say out into the danger zone. And I wouldn't allow him to go on those jobs because the risk of coming back was different to the risk of sitting in the compound, which pissed him off because he was there to do a job. But the way I saw my job then was to make sure that he still got home to his family. So we had other soldiers there that could do the same job. And I won't say that they had less to lose, but it's a different risk you carry when you've met your child.
That's such a huge decision for you to make as a leader in that space as well, and massive respect to you for analysing it from that perspective and saying, well, not only assessing what the capability is of the individual, but that more subtle risk that they're carrying, which I know all service members carry a huge amount of risk. And I'm not downplaying that in any way, shape or form, but that's a really complex set of decisions that you would have needed to make in the moment when you're sending people off to do various things.
It comes down to obviously experience. So in that situation, I'd already been in the Middle East 7 times prior at different ranks. So it comes down to experience and your decision-making process. But a big part of it is your personal beliefs. And for me, family first, always. First and foremost, family first. And whether that is that you believe it's your job to go and provide and protect for that family, or your job is to be home. Like, I'm so lucky now I get to drop my daughters off to school every day. I get to pick them up from school every day. The gym I work in, I get to pick the hours that I'm there, which then means that I get to do those things. And if the girls have an excursion coming up, I just take the day off and I go and do that excursion with the kids. It's almost a way of me making up for those early years with my older kids now, and yeah.
It's a bit hard to compare commercial television to deploying overseas, but that's part of the reason why I left that industry, because I didn't have the flexibility. If you called in sick, you got yelled at down the line. And it's like, I've got to look after my kid. There's nothing I can do. And and what really frustrated me sometimes in that role, that was coming from people who had children. And they had this perspective of work comes first. And I'm thinking, this is not the environment that I want to live in, which makes it so I can sort of relate to that in a ways. You talked about the number of deployments to the Middle East with, I think you mentioned it was 9?
8.
8 deployments to the Middle East. Was that a choice or was that just the job at the time?
I was never ordered or forced to go. So I want to make that very clear. For me, it was circumstance. With the roles that I did, there was a finite number of people in defence at that time, at that rank, that were qualified to do it. So unfortunately, you were rolled through every 2 years for a period of time, whether it be through Iraq in the embassy on the operation they called SecDet, or my job into Afghanistan. I was selected by the officer commanding that job to go with him. But ultimately, I agreed to take those jobs. Defence is a big machine, and the minute you're no longer available, they find somebody that is. Now, once upon a time, I was very bitter about that. The realistic process is that somebody has to do the job. if you're not available to do the job, they've got to find someone that can. I picked, when I separated from defence, so when I got out, I actually picked my replacement. So I was very lucky. I was in a position where I could say, all right, this is who I want to do my job. Yeah, it's not always like that. Like you, Alex, when we rang in sick because our kids were unwell, you've got a hell of a justification to make for that. So, and if you can't make that justification, you're in the shit. You're having to really explain not only to your boss, but to your men why you're unable to fulfill your job.
Can I ask you, it might be a bit of a personal question, and if it's treading the line, please feel free to tell me to jam it. But as your kids sort of aged up along the way, did you find that they were more and more curious about why you were going away for these stretches of time? Or was it just so part of the family fabric that it was obviously sad for them that you were going to be away for a while, but they just understood that you'd be gone for months on end?
Yeah, it just become normal. It was their normal, because when I wasn't away overseas, I was preparing another team to go overseas, or we were posting, so we were moving from state to state, so my kids never really had a chance to settle like my older kids. The two I have now, my eldest, my 11-year-old, she's only known 3 houses. My 6-year-old's only ever known 1 house, and that's the house I'm in now. They will never change schools. So the school they go to goes from reception all the way through to year 12. So they will never know a different school. They will never know the struggles that my other 3 kids had, where every 2 and 3 years I was picking up and they were going to a new school, having to make new friends, having to learn a whole new education system in a different state, disrupting their sport, disrupting every part of their life.
It sounds like that's your awareness of that has come from conversations with them. Would I be right in saying that? Like, have they voiced, perhaps in their older years, how they felt about that?
Yeah, so my youngest son, who's 27, lives here in Adelaide with me. My 19-year-old daughter and my 30-year-old son, which are the 3 from my previous marriage, they live up in Queensland. I have had those conversations, and he tells me it was really hard for him, and he's still very unsettled now at 27, really unsettled with constant, really, holding jobs, holding friends. Even schooling become really, really tough for him once we settled in Adelaide, where he found himself heading down the wrong path a couple of times, and even now he's had to check himself because he's found himself sort of venturing down the easy path as opposed to the best path, I guess.
Did and this is just sort of harking back to being a love-struck teenager, and the girlfriend you have when you're 13 or 14 is obviously the one you're going to be with forever. Did during your moves and whatnot, I know you mentioned earlier that it put a massive strain on your relationship with your ex-wife, but did you also have to have some really tough conversations with your kids when they were teenagers and saying, look, it's time for us to move again. I know you've got a girlfriend. I know you've got a boyfriend. It's, unfortunately part of the job. Was that ever part of the process?
I know, like with my son that moved with me, that was definitely a part of that process. My son and daughter that stayed with my ex, they only moved one other time, where they went to Queensland, and then that's where they stayed. And as I understand it, she's up there still somewhere, making Queensland even more of a place not to visit. And unfortunately, I'm going up to the Gold Coast tomorrow. But and as a New South Welshman, I already don't like Queensland, so it's a really good place for her to be because it just gives me more reason to not want to be there. But look, it is a real conversation, and being a big, tough soldier, I didn't communicate. I just said, this is what's happening. We're doing it. This is what's best for the career. This is what's best for the family. Career meant more money, which meant I could provide more. Promotions meant more responsibility, which meant I was being respected at work. And that one of the terms we use in the adolescent mental health stuff that I work with now is power need. So really meeting that power need for me. And that for me was a really selfish thing now that I look back at it, because I wasn't meeting anyone else's power need. It was just about mine. But I was the provider, and God damn it, I was going to provide. That's a tough pill to swallow these days. Once you get out, you separate and you find that, you know, there's more to life than the Defence Force. And all they care about is service need, not your needs. It's service need. So literally they bounced me at one stage from Brisbane. They brought me down to Adelaide, and after 12 months they were going to move me back to Brisbane, even though I'd asked to stay in Brisbane because my son was going through year 10, which they're not meant to move you for. And then they were going to make him come down here, do year 11 and then go back and do year 12 in Brisbane again. Ultimately, that was the catalyst for me. And I'm like, no. And they literally said to me, you've got two choices, post or get out. And I'm like, well, clearly my services aren't as respected as I thought they were. I'm done. Yeah, and that's when my mental health slid, because transition's not really transition. It's just casting back into the real world.
I think you might have just answered my question that I was about to ask, was how do you feel the Defence Force looks after families? Was there a change over the years, and where is it these days?
Defence is a lot more aware these days. I can sit here and bag Defence all I like, and they didn't always do the right thing by me, but they didn't always do the wrong thing by me either. So that's really important to understand. As I said, they're a big machine and they've got a job to do. The old saying, what we used to get told back in the day, in the 90s, was if the Defence Force or if the Army wanted you to have a family and a wife, they would issue it. If they haven't issued it to you, they don't want you to have it. So it's a choice. Your family married a soldier didn't marry your family. You know, and then they'd use old cliches like you joined us, we didn't join you, and that sort of stuff. And that was really ingrained in a lot of the seniors as I was coming up as a young soldier. And that was when I made the decision to never be like that and always put families first.
I remember being told when my boss in my broadcast news days pulled me aside, and because I was a couple of minutes late a few times a week, and said, well, and he says to me, well, it was your choice to have a baby. And I sort of said to myself, it's like, pardon the French, but get fucked. What are we doing? We're making videos that people watch at home while they're eating their dinner. Just relax. Like, give us a bit of leverage here. And I like to think that attitude is changing in, at least in the corporate world these days. I'm in a position now where that's definitely the case, where family often comes first, which is great. It sounds like that definitely is a challenge in defence. And as you say, they have a job to do and it has to be done. And, you know, we live in this beautiful free country because there are people like yourself that defend it.
You speak to a lot of veterans, and I speak to them almost on a daily basis. Most of us did it so someone else's son or daughter didn't have to. And those of us that went on to have extensive, long careers, you were bred for it. You were never, ever going to be able to do anything else. Anyone that serves over 10 years, you're meant to be there, to be honest. And if you fool yourself into believing that you're a corporate or that you're anything but a servant to your nation, and I say that with honour, that's not a sledge, then you're kidding yourself. And if you're kidding yourself, then you're never going to be happy. I don't regret a day of my service. Even all of the special occasions that I missed as a dad, I honestly don't regret a day of my service. Would I choose to do things differently? In some cases, yes. But would I do it all again? I'd do it all again tomorrow.
Listening to you both talk about your careers and what you've done over the years and the frustrations you have, you really, you know, as an observer of that, I think appreciating the insane level of luxury that comes with being a civilian, and you've got your frustrations and your boss is a dickhead, or you know you get pulled up because you're late to work, and you know maybe you get a little bit of a guilt trip put on you. It's like, oh, now Bob's going to have to stay back and he's going to have to do the compared to, mate, if you're not here, you're bred for this, and someone could be hurt or killed because of you, and that level of pressure that comes with that career. What I, you know, picking up what you're putting down, Damo, you know, what starts as a career choice and then becomes a very sort of part of your essence. Hearing you say once you click over that 10-year mark, it's almost like a proof. It's a badge to say, yep, you are made for this. Yep, you've now sort of reached that milestone to show, yep, you've got the goods to sustain this lifestyle. It's given me, and even as someone who's not met or dealt with as many veterans as you have, Damien, but I've met a number of veterans over the years. I work with a few of them. Even now, listening to you speak, it's this whole deeper level of appreciation of how intense and just mind-blowingly hidden in some ways from the general public of how full on those expectations are of the broader Defence Force on guys and girls like yourself.
We met each other a long time ago, Scotty, and you probably met me at a time where I was still very raw in my transition, and I'm sure if you think back at some of the conversations we had back then to where I am now, you'll go, holy crap, like I'm speaking to a completely different person. Where'd the big fella go? And it's all that time to reflect. And as you have children, you start to respect more life and life choices as opposed to what just makes you happy in the moment. But you also start to understand, and Alex, having 3 kids yourself, mate, you'll understand this. You start to appreciate the moment more and more as well. Like my youngest goes to bed at sort of 7:30 of the night. I'm still working, like I'm still in the gym at that time. So the mornings before school, I really appreciate those mornings with her. Even at 6, she'll still come and crawl into bed with me every now and then. And I really appreciate those moments. But then the flip side is my 11-year-old's still up when I get home. So I get to spend some one time with her as well. So I respect and appreciate those moments too. When my 11-year-old comes up and just gives me a hug, that melts you. I don't care how big and tough you are when your kids, regardless of how old they are, whether they're male or female, when you've missed so much of their life and they come up and give you a hug, you melt. And you're like, shit, this is where I'm meant to be, So yeah, that's probably the toughest thing.
My friend had a baby, now he don't sleep no more. Waves crash in his eyes, tides on the nursery floor. Oh, my friend had a baby, life flipped like a coin. Oh, my friend had a baby, chaos joined the joy.
If you enjoyed this podcast, consider leaving a review. It helps people find this podcast. Share with your friends or family. Love my daddy!
Diapers on the dashboard, milk stains on the moon. He says he's drowning in love, but man, it came too soon. Bassline pounding, heartbeat, wah-wah guitar scream. Parenthood's a dubstep drop, not some easy dream. Oh, my friend had a baby. Life lived like a
I think it's time for How to Dad, and we can get Damo's experience. So let's play that theme music.
How to dad, how to do, fix a boo-boo or a shoe, got a tantrum, got no clue. How to dad, it's in your hand, step by step you'll understand. How to dad, you're the man.
Scott, what is your question for this week?
So while we've got someone here with a level of knowledge that we've got, it's a bit of a loaded question, and it's really starting to play on my mind a lot with the state of the world we're in right now. And I'm not saying there's really ever been a point where there isn't some kind of global conflict going on, but realistically right now we've got a lot of powerful men with fingers that are hovering above big red buttons and so forth. My question to Damien and to yourself as well, Alex, because you might have a experience yourself, is When do you think is a good time to start educating your children around what global conflict is, and how would you land some of those conversations?
I'll let you go first, Alex. Been in the media.
Yeah.
I'll let you go. Been in the media.
I can jump on that first. I think probably the best. I mean, I've been out of the media for 3 years now, and fortunately, during my time there wasn't too much that we had to report on. But as a dad, when Israel-Palestine stuff kicked off a couple of years ago, and seeing the stuff happening to the kids over there, which today still breaks my heart, I sat down with my daughter and just tried to talk to her, I guess just as a bit of therapy for myself, around how lucky she is to live where she does and how fortunate we are. And because there are kids her age on the other side of the planet that don't have that. And she was like, yeah, okay, Dad. She was like 2 at the time. And I found that conversation just for me personally really difficult. And so I guess at the age of 3, I was trying to have those conversations with her. But now I think I'd be worried about scaring them. So I actually don't even know when to talk to them about it at the moment. But Damien, I'm keen to hear what you have to say.
For me, it's curiosity. So when they start asking me questions, I start talking to them about it, making myself available as a dad. And like, I don't watch a lot of news. It's part of my self-preservation these days with my PTSD. I try not to watch a lot of news. But my kids also go to a school that's very multicultural. And talking to them about treating each individual as an individual, not what their leadership are making, the decisions their leadership are making, or things like that. That's sort of the way I lead into conflict with the kids. Is I start with that very my youngest daughter, one of her friends is an young Arab girl, still traditionally dressed. She asks me questions about her scarf and all that sort of stuff. So that starts that conversation, and then treating them the same as you would anyone else and respecting their culture, and then starting that conversation about what's going on in the world, the conflict side of what's happening and why she's here, and in a lot of cases what brought their parents or grandparents here. And then I pass on some of my experience of what I saw. But being the military man I am, sometimes that communication can break down a little bit as well, where it becomes a little bit too raw. So just finding that line. But in terms of when, I let curiosity feed that, to be honest.
That's an awesome answer. And hopefully, because my son's coming along in about, 3.5 months now, frighteningly. I'd love to say that, there isn't going to need to be a lot of curiosity in his life, but I think we've got a lot of massive global unrest at the moment, and I dare say there's going to be a lot of curious kids, not just my own, in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years.
One of the things that I've seen in terms of the curiosity and global stuff that's going on is I work with schools now, working with some of the kids in schools, and as soon as they find out that I've served, they start asking me questions, and the schools are more than happy for us to address that within reason. Obviously, you don't go talking about individual situations, but in terms of, from an educated perspective, what's actually happening. And being a veteran, you never step out of the community, so you always know someone that knows someone. So you're always maybe a little bit ahead of the media in terms of knowledge, which then allows you to make an educated decision on what you tell people as well.
That's a perfect segue here, Damien, for you to talk a little bit about the Black Dog Combat Centre. Tell us about the centre. You're doing amazing work in the community with young people and veterans and emergency services and so forth. What you're building there is truly inspiring. Tell us about it.
Yeah, thank you. My wife purchased the gym for my mental health. So my psychiatrist actually said to me that I needed to do something fulfilling and I needed a purpose. Combat sports was what I knew, and violence predominantly. So it made a good thing that we bought that she bought the combat sports gym. I volunteer as the head coach here, and no one gets paid. So the money that we make in the gym stays in the gym for other programs, such as the adolescent emotional regulation program called Counterpunch that we run. Veterans and first responders program that we run where for those guys, they train free. There's no expectation for them to pay any money into the gym at all. And we do 2 closed-door sessions a week for those guys. That's a Monday and Wednesday morning where they can come up, they can hit a bag, they can sit and have a coffee, they can put their headphones on, sit in the corner and cry if that's what they feel like doing. And it just provides that environment for them to be able to do that. The reason I brought first responders in is it's a very similar mindset between military and first responders. They're a paramilitary organisation at heart. They deal with a lot of bad shit, whether it's fiery Zambos or coppers. So having somewhere that they can go to from a different organisation to talk about what they've done or had a bad day becomes really, really helpful. So yeah, that's what we do. We go out to schools. We're currently working with 3 schools in the northern suburbs of Adelaide through Counterpunch, so the emotional regulation stuff, where it's a 20-week program. We work with the kids and teach them about communication. We use boxing as the method for that. So if they're having a bad day at home, they can come up, just punch a bag for the first 10 minutes, get that frustration out, and then they go through some learning. And then they learn some skills and drills with that. They get some homework. A lot of that revolves around them, that homework revolves around them communicating at home. So it might be once a week, sit down and have dinner with your family. I was shocked when I found out how many families actually eat separate, like in different rooms or at different times and stuff like that. So something as simple as sitting down, having a meal and asking how someone's day was, that's lost in a lot of households these days. So that's what we do. Plus we're a competitive gym, so I've got active boxers and martial artists in the gym as well. So yeah, everybody trains with everybody. There's no segregation. We have a beginners class and a main class. The only time there's separation is when the fighters, like we've got an event coming up on the 21st of February, a Boxing SA event, and I've got 6 fighters nominated for that. So those 6 next week will break away from the main group and step into their specific camp for that fight. Otherwise, everybody trains with everybody. 5-year-old kids train with adults.
I do wonder sometimes, when I hear about what you're doing, Damien, and the community that you're building there, being a now anxious adult of what used to be quite an angry young man, not sort of lifting too much of the lid on my development and whatnot, because that's not what this podcast is about. But I do remember, very vividly, particularly throughout my teenage years and some of my formative years, being a pretty angry teenager a lot of the time and not having an outlet for that and not having a community of people to sort of say, hey, look, it's okay to feel that way, but it's more about what you do with that energy and what you do with those emotions that really matters. And, hearing the stories about what you're accomplishing, it's a part of me, even as an adult, I go, oh, fuck, I wish I had that growing up. Like, it's the perfect space for someone of that caliber. So, yeah, hats off to you for what you're doing.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I had a phone call actually from a previous member who's now working with a drug, alcohol and betting agency, and he wants to work with us and put us in touch with organisations like Good Sports and stuff like that because of the work that's being done up here. But to be honest, and I say this all the time, all I do is open a door and set a set of rules. The members are the ones that enforce the rules. The members are the ones that make sure that everybody's staying on track. I just make myself available and I just yell a lot when I'm up here. That's my job. And I like my job. But yeah, it's the environment that's now feeding on itself. Some call it a self-licking ice cream. It's here to serve itself now. And that's cool. I've got 16-year-olds now pulling up 25-year-olds for doing stupid shit. And they're like, that's not in line with what we do up here. And that's cool. So we've got these anxious kids and anxious adults walking up the stairs and I'm watching these proud, confident individuals walk down the stairs after just a couple of months of being up here.
Just sort of rewinding on the conversation about family and being away from family and so forth, something that you have mentioned consistently throughout the entire time I've known you, Damien, is the brotherhood that comes with being a service person or a serviceman and how you effectively begin building your own family that lasts both during your service years and beyond. How much of that brotherhood do you attribute to being able to stay level-headed both while serving and post-serving? Is that something that's still plays a major role in your day-to-day existence?
Yeah, the brotherhood's huge. To give you a good example, one of my coaches up here, I've known 30 years. So I was in East Timor with him in 1999, and I met him in 1996 when I first started working with him. He's now out. He moved from Townsville, and he's now one of my coaches up here. He's legitimately my best friend. If ever I had anything that I ever needed, he would be the one I would call and know that he would be there before more than half of my own blood family. So when I was deployed out of Townsville, he used to call in and help my wife out. So that was, 2008. I was deployed to Iraq for 9 months. And every day for those 9 months, he would stop at my house, help get my son ready for school, pick him up from school because he was already retired by that stage. Pick him up from school so that my wife could work. Or my now wife, she wasn't even my wife then, she was my girlfriend. If she was struggling, he would come and pick him up and just take him out. So that brotherhood's huge, even as much as you see the lads kicking around. The Veterans MC, and there's a couple of them now that are kicking around. You got Veterans MC, you got Diggers, you got Military Brotherhood, you've got Patriots, all military organisations of retired members. Some still serving that still crave that brotherhood, and that's why those sort of groups exist, while those organisations exist, is to continue that brotherhood afterwards.
Having people in your life that you're able to trust with your own flesh and blood, while you're away, and talking about having someone that you look at as an extension of yourself in some ways, that's able to go by the house and make sure your son's ready for school and make sure he's home and make sure he's, I'm sure, minding his P's and Q's from time to time. We would have to step in and give him the hard word. That, while it's not a substitute for you being there, I suppose for you knowing that there's someone in your life who cares as much about your family, or as close to as much about your family as you do, sounds so reassuring. And Alex and I have spoken a number of times before about how grateful we are to have our immediate family around us to give advice and, sort of say, oh, well, the bump's growing this way, or I'm worried about this here. What do you think about that? What you've had there with that fella who was backing you up is just next level. And it really speaks to that concept of brotherhood in the armed forces and what that really means. And I'm sure that if the shoe were on the other foot, you would do the exact same thing for him. Yeah,
100%. Like, I know his whole family. So his mum, his brothers, I know that whole family. As I said, we've been friends a really long time. But even to extend on that brotherhood, his car was at my house that often that I was getting phone calls from mates of mine from work thinking that my wife was having an affair. So even my own team here in Australia were ringing me overseas to go, "Oi, we're noticing this car in your driveway pretty often." So that sort of goes to show that brotherhood extends absolutely. Back in the day, we used to, if someone went away, we would go around and mow their lawn and we would do all those sort of things. Unfortunately, that side of it has dropped off. That sort of stuff doesn't happen as much. The military police used to drive past houses where we knew people were away just to make sure that they weren't being broken into. As I said, that sort of community stuff has dropped off a little bit more, but the individual brotherhood is definitely still there.
Can you tell me why, or from your understanding, why does the Black Dog Combat Centre need to exist? What is it about your own, because you talked about your own PTSD and your mental health, what from your experience and then what you saw in the community needed to happen?
So on our banner, it actually says everybody has a story, be part of their journey. And for me, that's really profound, because what it means is that everybody comes up here for their own individual reason. And when you come together, you help them through that reason. We called it Black Dog Combat Centre because obviously the Black Dog is mental health, and that's what we work with predominantly, is that mental health stuff. And we use controlled aggression and controlled violence to deal with a lot of that as an outlet. Why does it need to exist? Because there's nothing like it anywhere. There is nowhere, whether it's people's homes, whether it's school, whether it's work, that people can escape to 100% and just be them with no judgment. So we've got 4 very simple rules when you come up to this gym, and it's know where you go, no judgment, no schoolyard politics, and no fighting outside this gym. So they're non-negotiables for me. If you come up here and you judge somebody for their story, or you judge them for the way that they act up in this gym, this isn't the right place for you. And that's what builds family, that family and community in here. So when you ask me why does it need to be here, because there's nowhere else for half these people to be where they can be 100% safe and know that they're not being judged because they're not like the person next to them. I hope that makes sense.
As a pair of civilians, hearing that, we can, I don't mean to speak on behalf of you, Alex, but I think we can, to a degree, understand that. But I guess until you have lived it and really had to sit with the traumas, the life experience, the time away from families, the exposure to some of the most terrifying things and probably some of the most isolating experiences that can happen, you can only understand it in theory. I guess that's my response to you in the sense of whether it makes sense.
On the note of trauma and experience, everybody who has trauma is affected. And many a time I've had people come up and go, yeah, but my trauma doesn't even come close to yours. Trauma's trauma. And trauma comes from a time in your life that you've experienced the worst thing you could possibly experience. And how that trauma comes about is irrespective. The fact that you have trauma means that you have trauma. So when we talk about experience, my worst day now is so much different to my worst day 10 years ago, but it's still my worst day. So what we try and do, especially up here, and that's part of that no judgment, no ego stuff, is look at each day as it comes and look at each individual by their own experience. So like I've got someone in the gym at the moment trying to quit smoking. For them, that's the worst thing in their life right now. And for others, they'll go, quit smoking. Why is that the worst thing? How can that be that bad? How can that be creating so much hard time for that person? But for that person, that is the hardest thing in their life right now. And that's what we have to remember. And as a dad, back in the day, I still had that very military mindset of, you stubbed your toe, pick yourself up, let's go. Whereas now when my daughter falls off her bike, it's the worst thing happening to her right now. So pick her up and give her a cuddle and make it okay. That's what you're there for, is to keep them safe. And part of that safety is not just physically safe, it's emotionally safe, and let them know that you're available for them.
So, Damien, you talk about trauma. Can you give us an example from your experiences of trauma for you?
Probably one of the most traumatic experiences I had goes back to 2004. There was trauma before that, but this is one that really sticks to mind because it talks about value of life and being that we're here to talk about parenting. It plays right into that space as well. So I was in Iraq. We were sitting on the 14 July Bridge, which is an American checkpoint going from the Badlands into the green zone, into the safe area. We lived in the Badlands, or the red zone, off University Drive, for those that are anywhere near familiar with Baghdad. And we were heading across the 14 July Bridge and we were sitting in the American checkpoint, waiting to go through. The car in front of us was being checked when all of a sudden a young lad appeared. So left-hand drive, so appeared. I was sitting in the passenger seat. It was only myself and my driver, who was another operator, or another close protection operator. And I corrected that. I just want to make this clear. I corrected that because operators are generally known as special forces and I was not special forces. So I was a close protection operator, which is what we were called. So up next to my window on the right side of the car appeared a young lad who then proceeded to open his shirt and was wearing a suicide vest. I heard him say to the Americans, "I don't want to die." The checkpoint was shut down. Nobody in, nobody out, while they dealt with this young lad. Fortunately, they got the vest off him, so he didn't die, and he was taken by the US, and then where he went from there, I couldn't even speculate. I would like to hope that he was given treatment and some safe passage somewhere. It turned out that vest was put on him by his dad. He was expected to detonate that vest on his own to kill Americans. Any Allied force. So if that vest had detonated, potentially I wouldn't have been sitting here. That was then the catalyst that led to remote detonation on suicide vests in Iraq. It was because this young lad then decided that he didn't want to kill himself and become and create martyrdom for his family. I raised that one because it shows that there's different spectrums of parenting. There's different views on parenting through different cultures. Would I have loved to have got my hands on that dad? 100% of the time. Would I have done unspeakable things that probably would have led me to be in jail in Hague somewhere? 100% of the time. Would I have regretted it? Not at all. But, yeah, it's just important to understand that he was doing something that he believed at that time was right. And that young lad was forced into a situation which is very, very common, even here in Australia with some of the kids that I work with, very, very common. That they are put in a situation that they're not comfortable, they don't want to be by parental figures, not always mums and dads, but parental figures. So that's something really important to understand, that not everybody has that same aspect of life that we have, and that there are kids out there dealing with mums and dads that aren't as pleasant as they could be.
That sounds like it's something that's really stuck with you.
Yeah, mostly because just the look on this kid's face, I can see his face. Every time I talk about it, I can see this kid. Yeah, and to be honest, very selfishly, my first thought was preservation. I looked at my driver and I'm like, get us the fuck out of here. You know, in a guilty way now, I look back at it and go, well, my last thought was what was going through this kid's head when it should have been. And these days I would hope to think it's my first thought is what is going through this kid's head and how can I help him?
I don't think there's much. I don't think selfishness is the theme of your reaction in that situation. I mean, collectively, all those different variables. You know, the father strapping the vest to his son, you being essentially, you know, immediately exposed to that. Again, as a civilian, it's not until you hear those stories and the background of why they're happening and where they're happening and who's exposed to it that you just can't get that appreciation for what members of the Army, the Air Force, the Navy get exposed to. Those are lessons and life experiences that, and I'll use the word again, luxury, that everyday run-of-the-mill Australians don't need to think about, don't need to live with, don't need to lie in the dark and stare at the ceiling and think about. From my end of things, I got nothing but the most undying gratitude that there are people like yourself, Damien, who are prepared to put everything on the line to ensure that knuckle draggers like Alex and I don't have to be exposed to this stuff. It's, yeah, I've got 1,000 words. They're all caught in my mouth at the same time. I just, completely floored by it.
That's my experience. I know guys that I talk to, they've had experiences that I'm exactly like you are right now, Scott, where I'm like, well, I'm speechless. I have civilian mates, especially through the first responder guys, where I look at and go, anything I've ever been through could not match that what you're telling me right now. So it's a massive part of what shaped my opinion of trauma is trauma, regardless of how you get it. It does the same thing to each of us, and that is, if you allow it, it runs your life and ultimately leads you down a very, very dark hole. Being able to talk about it, and as I said, Scotty, we've known each other a long time, mate. You probably would have never heard that story.
No, never.
So that's one of the stories I actually tell the kids when I'm working with them now about my time and what led me to be where I'm at now in terms of recovery and not being a victim. The biggest thing you'll get from 90%, and I'll say 90% of the veterans community, is we're not victims. We're survivors. We chose to do what we did. We chose to be where we were, and we come out of it at the other side better people for it. We're survivors. We're not victims.
What would you say to families who are looking to young men, young women who maybe have a family or are thinking about it and joining defence from your perspective now? What would you say to them?
That's a loaded question. You were a journo, weren't you? See, this is why I don't trust media. Very much. As I said, I would do my time again tomorrow. Different Defence Force these days. I would do my time back in that army again tomorrow. I don't know how I'd go in this army. I don't know if I'd survive this army. I'm a bit old school, and most of the dinosaurs like me are out now. As I said, my own son serves. My other son's talking about enlisting. I encourage people to enlist if that's what they want to do. But what I do say is go in with your eyes open, get as much advice as you can before you go, and don't listen to all the negative. If it was all negative, no one would be in. Whereas there's people out there having extensive careers, so it can't all be bad.
God, that story, man. Holy shit.
It's just one, Scotty. It's just one.
Yeah, I know. I'm just thinking, like of those, like the young people that you work with, and God, that must put them on their ass pretty quickly when you tell that story. The majority.
Yeah, there's another one I tell, and this one carries probably more weight for me, to be honest. That's one I use because it was very young and formative in my time. So that was my first trip to the Middle East, was 2004. So I was still very a young soldier in terms of what I did. This last one, this next story was when I was at 2IC, the detention centre, and we had to do some work in patrol bases, so we had to go outside the wire. I had a massive discussion with my boss about who we were going to send, and ultimately I went, because I won't send my soldiers into something that I'm not prepared to do myself, and that's just a moral thing for me. We were getting the brief about use of firearms and the rules of armed conflict and all that sort of stuff, and when we could shoot and when we couldn't. And the lads were using pen flares, like a little pen, same size as a pen, and they used that to disperse crowds. No one ever got injured from it. You bounce it off the ground. It's just like a fireworks bouncing off the ground. You know, the old jacks, the old crackers. It just looks like one of those bouncing off the ground. If it hit you, you might get a little scold, but you'd never be seriously injured. So this lawyer was telling us that it was illegal to do that, which by Geneva Convention's laws of armed conflict it is. And Australia doesn't have a warning policy, so we don't fire warning shots. Every shot we fire is a shoot to kill, and fire at centre or scene mass, and that's always been the way. This lawyer was talking about all that, and I jumped up and asked the question, how do you want these guys to deal with passive crowds when they can't get their vehicles through and now they're having rocks thrown at them? Obviously, within the laws of armed conflict, they can use their rifles and they can shoot and kill people. Very hard to go home and sleep at night, killing a teenager for throwing a rock at you. I ended up making that very clear and leaving the brief, where I was followed by a number of soldiers. We got in the cars and we headed out into Tarankout. I was based at Tarankout at the time. We headed out into Tarankout, and all the kids there carried replica AK-47s on their back, and these things look real. So we're driving down the road. I'm in the rear vehicle, manning the machine gun, and I see this young lad with something the same size as his hand in it, so similar size to a grenade or something, and he's about to throw it. He's got what I believed at the time to be an AK-47 strapped to his back. So as far as I'm concerned, he's a combatant. I then take up a side picture with a Mag-58. Now, those that know a little bit about weaponry, it's a 7.62 firearm. And if it hits you in the head at short range, it'll take your head off. So I've got a machine gun loaded with those. I'm pointing that at what is potentially a 6-year-old child and about to squeeze the trigger, because I believe that he's going to throw what is a grenade and then potentially take a fire position and start shooting at us. That's a split of the moment decision that I had to make. So I'm about to squeeze it. He's obviously realised that this barrel is pointed straight at him. He's dropped what I now know to be a rock, and he's turning. As he's turned, I've got the dull glimmer of a replica weapon, plastic, on his back. Now, if I'd squeezed the trigger, I would have been truly within my rights defence and what that legal officer was telling us, to pull the trigger and kill that 6-year-old child. But I chose not to. I chose to take my time and see where it went. But the flip side to that was that if he'd thrown or used a slingshot, which they were using against us sometimes, to catapult what could have been a grenade into that vehicle, we could have had Australian deaths as well. So that's something else that sort of sits with me a little bit. And that's one of the other stories that I talk to these kids about when I talk about taking a breath can create a good decision or a poor decision. And that's all it was. It was that breath that I took where I went, all right, I'm not ready to squeeze yet. I mean, it wouldn't have been the first time I squeezed the trigger on a weapon in those environments, but I wasn't ready to do it at that stage. And I was glad that I took that breath because it gave him the time to put down what he was holding, which then meant that we didn't, create more terrorists by killing a young lad and then his family seeking retribution against that. And a young lad learned very quickly that throwing rocks is not a cool thing to do.
They're absolutely phenomenal story, and I really hope that anyone listening, as you say, takes a breath next time they're about to make a decision or is able to share that with someone else who they think needs to hear that. I think that's really valuable. So thank you so much for joining us today on the podcast. It means a lot to us to have you and sharing your stories, and I really hope that anyone and everyone listening has something from that, and I'm sure they do.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate you guys giving me time to put my perspective across as a dad with, I guess, a special circumstance.
Yeah, and thanks for yet again surprising me, Damien, despite knowing you for all these years. There's always a deeper well to you. You never cease to amaze, that's for sure. Also want to extend a huge amount of gratitude to all service members, past and present, and recognise all the sacrifices they've made throughout their careers, both with their families and in some cases with their lives themselves. So from both Alex and myself, a huge thank you to the community for keeping us safe. Alex, as always, a huge pleasure. Damien, we'll have to find an excuse to get you back on here again so I can sit mouth agape like a fool again.
Damo, how can people find your gym?
So we have a website, which is blackdogcombatcentre.com. We're on Facebook. We're on Facebook as Dogfight Combat Club, which is what we previously were, because fighting to get the name Black Dog was huge. They can track us down on Facebook and on Twitter as as Black Dog Combat Centre. Or just walk in. Everybody's welcome.
All right, thanks everyone for listening in again. We look forward to having you again in the future. One final thought for all you tired parents out there, just remember MRE in the pot, baby in the high chair.
Oh, my friend had a baby. Chaos joined the joint.
I don't know what that means, but I'll take it.
Damien did, thankfully.
So an MRE is an American meal ready to eat.
Ah, right. Well, there you go.
Podcast.